So I already mentioned in a previous video that Six Flags did pretty poorly in 2019 and things are currently not going great for the company. If you watched that video, you'll remember that Six Flags executives had said that on May 28th, they were going to present their new strategic plan going forward, but due to this current coronavirus situation, that day will not be happening. On top of that, their dividend, which they just cut by 70%, that's being suspended and being put on hold. The board recently approved a stock buyback situation for $232 million while the stock was really low, as they were worried about a potential hostile takeover. Well, they're not doing that anymore. And the company has greatly increased their amount of debt already when we've only gotten through a couple of months of this situation. So clearly, I think it's safe to say that Six Flags is not going to be in the greatest position when all this is said and done with, which is why today we're going to talk about who could buy Six Flags. Now, when the coronavirus situation is over, do I think that Six Flags will still be around, or do I think they'll have gone bankrupt? Well, I don't really know, but for right now, I'm staying optimistic and thinking that the company can survive. So that being said, there's a couple of options for what can happen to them. For one, that hostile takeover situation that the board was so worried about, that could absolutely happen with the stock price pretty low. An investment group or a wealthy individual could easily come along, buy up enough stock, and take over the company. I actually don't think this is the worst possible scenario for Six Flags, as it would inject a lot of cash into the company and definitely keep them afloat at least for the next couple of months after the acquisition. On top of this, usually when you see an investment group or individual investor come along and take over a company, usually they have some pretty big ideas and big changes for it, which honestly in this moment in time I don't necessarily think would be the worst thing for Six Flags going forward. Another possibility is that AT&T, the owner of Warner Brothers, could potentially buy out Six Flags. With Six Flags already using Warner Brothers theming in the Looney Tunes and DC, it would be easy for AT&T to just buy the Six Flags parks and leave them as they are. After all, AT&T is a very diversified business and is going to have the money after all this is said and done with to make a purchase like that. And when you consider that chances are Six Flags is going to be willing to sell on the cheap at that point, this would be a great time to get into the American theme park industry. Now, AT&T has only owned Time Warner and Warner Brothers for about a year or two now, and that came with the Warner Brothers Movie World parks in other parks around the globe, so they are currently running theme parks already, just none in the US, and Six Flags could be a great way to get in and make a pretty big foothold in that industry. And now, I'm going to be honest, I don't really think that there are any other individuals or groups that would be interested in buying the whole chain, other than those two, investment groups and AT&T. The company as a whole has too many problems going on, and it's too many lackluster parks in its portfolio for someone else, whether it be another theme park chain or another company or an individual, to want to take on that whole company other than investment groups or AT&T. So that brings me to the other scenario where Six Flags stays alive and stays intact, but has to consolidate and sell off a good chunk of their parks in order to stay afloat. So before we go through all of our potential buying candidates, let's talk about the few parks that we pretty much know for a fact Six Flags is going to want to hold on to when the situation is all said and over with. So I think it's safe to say that they're going to hold on to their top 3 attendance, top 3 profitable parks, those being Magic Mountain, Great America, and Great Adventure. With how profitable and how successful these parks are, they'd really be silly to let these parks go unless they got a really great price for them. The other park I believe they'll try to hold on to is Fiesta Texas, because that's in a growing tourism area in San Antonio and has been doing a lot of good for them recently, and they've also invested a lot into it recently. So I do think that this park could eventually be coming to their upper echelon, and I think they're going to try their best to hold on to that when all is said and done. That being said, I think every other park in their chain is completely up for grabs if anyone wants it. So obviously your number one potential buyers for individual parks would be the theme park chains. So how about looking at this list of buyers here in these theme park chains? How about we start with the one that for some reason has been so heavily rumored and I don't understand it, that being Disney. Disney, of course, a major player in the theme park world, arguably the biggest player in the theme park world. And it may be easy to assume that maybe they want to expand that empire. But there's a couple important things that we should note here. For one, Disney's not going to have a whole lot of funds when this is all said and over with. I mean, they're completely focused on entertainment and leisure, and the only thing generating the money right now is Disney Plus and on-demand rentals. So despite what many of you might think, Disney is not this unstoppable, unbeatable giant, and in fact, they can also go through some pretty rough times. Now, with that being said, just for argument's sake, let's pretend that they did have the funds to buy a park, and see how that would go for them. Now, what I'm about to say here goes for any park they would buy, but let's start off and go with Great Adventure as an example here, because that's the one that they've been the most heavily rumored to buy in the past. So let's just go with that as an example. So Disney would have to buy Six Flags Great Adventure for whatever cost that would be. Then they have to retheme it, rebrand it for whatever cost that would be. And then they would also have to consider the fact that a lot of their tourists that go to Walt Disney World in Florida actually come from the New Jersey, New York area. So now those people are not coming to Walt Disney World. In fact, they're going to the Disney in New Jersey. Well, you might say at first, that's not a big deal. That's not a big deal. Well, here's the thing. It's self-cannibalization, and they're taking away their own customers. And at first, that might not seem like the worst thing in the world, right? They're still getting those customers, right? Well, now those customers aren't paying for hotels. They're not paying for expensive dinners. They're not paying for all these other tourist/vacation type things. And that's going to cost Disney a lot of money in the long run. And this pretty much goes for any park that they decide to buy in the Six Flags chain that's a regional park. They're just going to eat away at their own profits. Now, let's not forget as well, this would also dilute the brand, right? Right now, Disney's looked upon as this, amazing once-in-a-lifetime experience type thing. If they go into a regional park, well, all of a sudden, it doesn't become as special. And if Disney's not special anymore, well, then they can't charge as much as they used to. And guess what? The same exact argument can be made for Universal. They are also tourism-based, and expanding into regional parks would just dilute the brand and dilute their profits. And also, when you consider that not only are they building a new park in their Orlando resort, but they're also building a park in Beijing, they obviously are more interested in expanding their current resorts in the States and expanding into more international markets than they would be to expand into anything regional related. Now, before we move on, you might have noticed that there's a little Six Flags sitting in the middle of the ocean here at the bottom of the map. Yeah, no, that's not Six Flags Atlantis, that's actually Six Flags Mexico, just that I couldn't fit Mexico on the map, so don't get it twisted, there's no Six Flags at the bottom of the ocean. The next company I want to talk about is arguably Six Flags' biggest competitor, that being Cedar Fair. Cedar Fair will probably be in a similar situation to Six Flags when this is all said and over with the exception that they won't have quite as much debt and they also won't be as tied up in bad assets, those being not profitable parks. So I don't necessarily see them having too much money to spend on buying parks when all this is said and over with, but they might be able to buy at least a couple. One I have my eye on that many others might not is Great Escape. And the reason why is that even though it's not a very good park overall, it does have a hotel, which we already know Cedar Fair does like getting involved in. I mean, they have a Cedar Point hotel and they also have a Knott's Berry Farm hotel. I could definitely see them kicking this up and trying to evolve it into an actual good, more or less, destination park. You may also notice from the map here that Carowinds is the farthest south that the company goes. So I could see Over Texas, Fiesta Texas, and Mexico as options. Of course, like I said, Six Flags probably will not sell Fiesta Texas, even though that probably would be the one Cedar Fair wants to buy the most. But as for Over Texas, the issue with that is that, of course, they don't have a whole lot of expansion room. There's not really a whole lot you could do with that. They're landlocked. It's a tough buy. It's a tough sell. I don't necessarily think Cedar Fair is going to want to spend the money on that park, if any of them. But as for Six Flags Mexico, it is very popular with the locals down there. Six Flags has done a great job with it. I think that could be one that Cedar Fair might actually want to expand into since they don't have any holdings in Mexico and they don't really have any holdings very far south either. Other than that though, maybe I could see them buying Six Flags New England and maybe buying Six Flags America because they are in pretty decent locations that maybe if they get the proper investment, they could actually become world-class parks. But I doubt that they'll probably go for one of those. So the next company we're going to take a look at here is Herschend Family Entertainment. They're a pretty small theme park chain. They only have 3 major parks, with 2 of them in Silver Dollar City and Dollywood doing most of the major lifting. We don't really know exactly how much money this company's going to have. They are privately owned, so realistically, it's up to their owners to really know exactly how much money they're willing to spend. Given that Herschend, like many other theme park chains, is going to be losing money during this time, if they were to buy a park, it would have to come out of the owner's pocket. Since they are pretty much completely based in the southeast part of the United States, I have a couple of parks that I have my eye on that they could potentially buy. One of those being Frontier City. Now, Frontier City, obviously not one of the best parks out there. In fact, as we know from Six Flags report last year, it is probably losing money right now. But the park does have a very similar feel to Dollywood and Silver Dollar City, and could definitely, if given the proper amount of time and investment from Herschend, could definitely become one of those parks that could actually do really good despite not being in necessarily the best location. My only concern here is that it might be a little bit too close to Silver City. After all, Silver City does get a good amount of their visitors from like the whole regional area, like hours away. People really do go out of their way to go there. So that might be my only concern, but I think that's probably a minimal one. I think Frontier City is probably still the best buy of all these parks for Herschend. That being said, I do think that there's some other parks, one of those being Over Texas. Now, there were rumors a while ago that Herschend was going to buy Over Texas for quite a lot of money. To my knowledge, there was absolutely zero validity behind those rumors, but I do still think that it's actually a decent buy for Herschend, right? There's a lot of history behind Over Texas, and it kind of does fit in with the theme of their current parks. But, like I said in the Cedar Fair argument, they are landlocked. They cannot expand. They don't have ample amount of room to work with, right? What you're getting is pretty much what you're going to have to work with, right? If you want to get anything new, anything majorly new, you got to get rid of something. And that just might not be worth it when you're talking about acquiring a new park. The last one I have here is Over Georgia, which is kind of a long shot because, as you can see, they do have another park already in Georgia, that being Wild Adventures. However, they are on other sides of the state, with Wild Adventures being in the south and Over Georgia being in the north. Over Georgia, unlike Frontier City and Over Texas, doesn't really necessarily fit the theme of a lot of Herschend parks, but Herschend is headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, so maybe they could want another park down there, and I know for a fact that they would definitely not want someone else to get Over Georgia and compete with Wild Adventures. I think if anything, maybe what Herschend maybe does is just buy the scraps from Over Georgia, or just really hope for that park to shut down. I think ultimately the biggest thing here is they don't want Over Georgia to continue being a competitor for Wild Adventures, because they really do want that park to eventually kind of pop up as a major player. The next theme park chain I'm going to talk about is SeaWorld. I mean, they're not going to be in a much better spot than Six Flags either when all this is said and over with. Of course, their CEO just resigning not too long ago, so they're not in the best spot either. Of course, I did recently make a prediction that they would do well in the next decade, and I still stand by that, but it's not going to be easy. And they're certainly not going to be in the best spot right after this thing is over with. So realistically, I don't necessarily see them buying anything, at least not right away. Now, if you want to talk about which parks they could potentially buy, I know everyone's going to be looking at Discovery Kingdom and saying, oh, that's the obvious one because it has animals. Here's the thing, SeaWorld's trying to move away from animals. They do not want animals in their parks anymore, right? Like, the only reason why they haven't gotten rid of them yet from a lot of their existing parks is because these animals were born in captivity and they can't just throw them back into the wild or else they'll die. So they're basically bag holding these animals right now. They do not want any more on their hands. Now, as you can see from SeaWorld's current holdings, majority of their parks are in the southern part of the US and are year-round parks. So if SeaWorld's actually going to spend the money after the situation is over to acquire another park, it's going to be a year-round one, not one that's seasonal. So honestly, my best bet for what SeaWorld would be interested in buying would be Six Flags Mexico. Since SeaWorld doesn't have any parks down there, their brand name probably isn't anywhere near as tarnished down there as it is here. So expanding there actually probably would not be the worst thing that SeaWorld could do. I mean, we know they're already trying to expand internationally with a park in Abu Dhabi. I think that this would definitely work in their favor if they move to Mexico. And if you're looking at all these other parts of Six Flags owns, honestly, I don't really think SeaWorld will be interested in buying any of these. Either they just don't really fit in with the SeaWorld brand, like they don't look beautiful enough, they don't have the right landscaping, they don't have the right theming, and it would take much work to overhaul them. Whereas Mexico might be a little bit easier to do, especially considering that their brand name is not tarnished down there. So, how about we move on to our final theme park chain here, that being the biggest wild card in Merlin Entertainments. So Merlin is arguably the biggest player in Europe with parks like Alden Towers and Gardaland and Heidi Park, all those. But they do also have holdings in the US, those being the Legoland parks. Now, Merlin is a little bit more diversified than your typical theme park chain. They do have like some midway attractions like escape rooms and stuff like that. But of course, when you're talking about buying something right after the pandemic's over, that stuff's not going to help because they're also closed right now. So I can't necessarily imagine that Merlin's going to have more funds than someone like Cedar Fair or SeaWorld would after all this is over with. So chances are they'll also be interested in just buying like one or two parks probably. The question is, if they really want to expand further into the States, where would they want to go? Well, honestly, if you look at pretty much all their parks, they all come with a hotel. Every single one of them is a resort. So it would make sense that they would go for a park that has that, and that being Great Escape. I know, nobody really thought Great Escape would be a hot commodity after all this was said and done with, but there you go. I mean, Great Escape has the hotel. And here's the thing, you either keep it Great Escape, or they could easily retheme it to a Legoland if they want to and call it Legoland New York. I could absolutely see that working out for someone like Merlin. Honestly though, if we're looking at the rest of these, I just am not really sure if they're really interested in taking a risk on any of the other parks, right? Obviously, unless they could get one of the major players like Great Adventure, Magic Mountain, or Great America, which obviously they probably won't because you would have to pay a extreme premium for those, and Merlin's not going to necessarily have that kind of money coming out of this pandemic. So honestly, I do think Great Escape is the play for Merlin if they do decide to buy one of the Six Flags parks. Now, you might have noticed there's a lot of Six Flags parks that I said Six Flags didn't want to keep, but nobody's really interested in buying. Those being Discovery Kingdom, St. Louis, Ronde, and Darien Lake. And you can even throw in New England and America in this conversation as well, since, like I said, they're pretty long shots for someone like Cedar Fair to buy. There are still 2 other potential buyers who could get these parks, those being real estate buyers and just individual investors. According to many reports, a park like Six Flags America in Washington, D.C. could be sitting on land worth upwards of $500 million. So it's very possible that someone who's interested in that land could buy it and then just sell off the land once the park has been demolished. Of course, however, this was the case when Six Flags tried to sell Astro World. They demolished it for $20 million and only got about $45 million back for the land, despite them actually asking for a whole lot more, thinking that it was worth more. As for the individual buyer situation, think about what happened with Kentucky Kingdom. Six Flags, of course, shuttered the park when they went bankrupt, and the park sat empty for a while until the current owners of Kentucky Kingdom got together, found the money, and bought the park off of their hands. And now, as a result, Kentucky Kingdom operates as a single independent park. I could absolutely see something like that happening to a park like Darien Lake, or even Ronde maybe, even though Ronde's horrible. I could definitely see that happening because chances are nobody's going to want these parks and they're going to just close because Six Flags is not going to afford to be able to keep them open. So maybe if there are a good enough fan base for those parks out there, maybe a group gets together and buys back those parks and has them open. But with all that being said, I think it's safe to say that chances are, if Six Flags is going to survive this situation, it's not going to be anything like how we see them now today. There's going to be parks that are closed. There's going to be parks that are sold off. There's going to be parks that Six Flags puts their focus into more than others. But realistically, the best option here for us enthusiasts is just that these parks stay open, whether they're owned by another theme park chain or by AT&T or by an individual buyer, whatever. So long as these parks stay open, it's the best case scenario for us given the current situation. And let's just hope for the best. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think is going to happen with the Six Flags parks and, who's going to get bought by who and whatnot. It's interesting speculation, so might as well. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.